All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public meeting of the Halton District School Board for January 19th, 2022. As per public health recommendations, we are meeting remotely this evening. As we continue to meet virtually, we will be using a combination of the Google Forms as well as the function in Google Meets. Trustees will be directing all the questions to Director Ennis, and he will delegate to the appropriate staff. Let's also remember the meeting rules of the road, which is part of the agreement made for this term. Now, before I begin, I'm going to start with many thank yous, as I don't think we're able to say them enough. Thank you to our staff for working so hard to manage those 2 weeks online learning at the beginning of the year, and then the pivot to begin those face-to-face sessions today. I also want to thank them for the flexibility they are providing for those students who have chosen or who are needing to learn remotely. I know all the efforts that teachers are making to ensure meaningful learning is able to take place with all of our community of learners, in person or online. Thank you to our families in their recognition of these imperfect times. I know that parents have had to find ways to make this all work over the past 2 weeks, and I want to say thank you for your flexibility, understanding, and support we have seen. Finally, the biggest thank you is got to be to our students. We appreciate all the challenges, shifts, and pivots that you've had to work with over the last couple of years, and we really appreciate all your hard work. Thank you. All right, I will now take trustee roll call, and as usual, I'm mixing it up a little bit just to keep everybody on their toes, so I randomize the order, and so we're going to start with Trustee Reynolds tonight.
Good evening, everyone.
Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Hello, I'm here. Nice to see you.
Trustee Oliver.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee Vidyalankara.
Hi, everyone.
Trustee Gray.
Hello from the hills.
Trustee Bao.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee Daniele.
Thank you, I am here.
Trustee Garrett.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee Rocha.
Hello from Oakville.
Trustee Collard.
Hello from Burlington.
And Trustee Gerbentz.
Hi, everybody.
And finally, Trustee Amos.
Good evening, everyone.
Great, welcome everyone. Director Ennis, can you let us know of staff that are here tonight, please?
Thank you, and good evening, Chair Shuttleworth, and to the rest of the trustees. We have a full complement of staff here to support the board meeting tonight.
Wonderful, that's great. Thank you so much. All right, and tonight, Trustee Gerbentz will be honoring the land.
Thank you. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawaddaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all of the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us.
Thank you very much. All right, let's check in. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? Excellent. Seeing none, we are now going to move on to the agenda. Trustee Amos, would you like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Great. And Trustee Gerbentz, would you like to second the motion?
I'd be happy to do that.
Great. Is there any discussion? And I've lost my mouse, so I'm trying to get to the list. Trustee Vice Chair Harrison, can you let me know? I hear a bleep, but I don't know who it is.
Trustee Oliver, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. To you, Chair, I'd like to make the amendment that the student trustee report be moved up in the agenda and so that the student trustees are permitted to ask all of their questions right after the report. We appreciate that this is a very busy and stressful time for our student trustees and all of our secondary students as they wrap up their semester. And I know that our student trustees received lots of questions that they would like to answer in a public forum. Further to that, Trustee Reynolds and I believe that tonight's amendment lends itself to a broader discussion about the placement of the student trustee report and student trustee questions in our agenda template. And so I'd like to bring that for a discussion at the committee of the whole, where student trustees and others at the table can be involved. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So Trustee Oliver is suggesting an amendment to the agenda. Do I have a seconder? All right, Trustee Reynolds. Is there any discussion around amending the agenda to bring the student trustee reports forward so that they have some time to attend to their studies? Trustee Krivens.
Yes, I just would like to know specifically where it will be.
So I think we will put it at the beginning of the action items. Is that where I thought that I would put it? Yes, in communication to the board, it will come just before the action items for this evening. So 6.0 is communication from the board, so we'll slot that in there and then move everything accordingly, if that works for everybody. Manager Gortmaker.
Just a procedural question. The motion does not need to be amended per se. It has not yet been read or voted on. So you could make the motion to approve the agenda as revised, noting Trustee Oliver's revision.
Okay, all right. Awesome, thank you very much. All right, Trustee Reynolds, do you still have your hand up? No, it's just a legacy hand. All right, so seeing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the agenda as revised, please cast your votes.
In support.
Thank you. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, where are we now? Okay, so as per our agenda, we're now up to presentations. Or sorry, first of all, we have no Inspire Awards for this evening. However, I would like to take this opportunity to encourage you to continue to nominate individuals or groups who support our students and their achievements. If you remember, nomination information is available on the HDSB website. So if you know somebody who's doing something special within the community of schools, please let us know. Quickly checking in, are there any conflicts of interest relating to the agenda this evening? Great. Seeing none, we are now up to presentations. And as per our agenda this evening, we have one presentation, which is the 2020-21 AODA Annual Accessibility Status Report, and it is attached to your board package. Executive Officer Gadet, can I pass it over to you and your team?
Thank you and good evening. And I'd like to welcome our General Manager of Human Resources, Allison Ippolito, who's going to co-present this evening. And so welcome. And if you're good to present, share your screen, Allison, we'll kick it off.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. My name is Allison Ippolito, and I'm the General Manager of Human Resources. Tonight, Myself and Executive Officer Gaudette will take a few minutes to go through a presentation that provides an overview of the annual accessibility report from the 2020-2021 school year. The report itself is really a collaborative effort put together by the Accessibility Committee as well as the various departments of the board. Myself and Executive Officer Gaudette were recently appointed as the co-chairs of the committee. So the report itself details actions, as I said, that are taken in last school year, the 2020-2021 school year, and it provides an overview of what the board did to meet the standards and the legislation of AODA. So the 5 standards in AODA are information and communication, employment, transportation, customer service, and design of public spaces. Tonight we'll go through some of the policies, procedures, the training to staff and students, and review what was done from an employment perspective, information and communication, and built environment. The board is compliant with AODA and right now is really in a maintenance phase of ensuring that compliance, as well as going above and beyond those minimum standards as the legislation stipulates. These particular policies and administrative procedures were reviewed or are actually brand new as of last school year. The first 2 employment equity policy and teacher hiring practices are brand new and were really possible as a result of the repeal of Reg 274 and PPM 165. And at the root of these policies and procedures is really diversity, equity, transparency, and valuing those diverse perspectives. And that includes individuals who identify with disabilities, both visible and invisible. The prescribed use of assistive technology sets out a transparent process for the use of technology, who qualifies for it, and how to secure an upgrade. And all of these policies and procedures are available on the public board website. This is a non-exhaustive list of the training and the opportunities that were provided to staff last school year. Some of them speak directly to AODA compliance, while others might not be specific to the legislation itself, but certainly principles of AODA are embedded within the training themselves. And these specific trainings would really go to increase awareness and improve the culture and the stigma that may be associated with disability, which of course goes to our collective responsibility to remove barriers. On top of these trainings, the board continues to ensure that new staff complete a accessibility awareness training when they're first brought on board. And this is a requirement on a 5-year cycle for employees to remind them of their professional responsibility to enable all to achieve their full potential. From an employment perspective, there's been a few new initiatives that started last school year. And of course, ongoing maintenance in terms of established practices that already existed that lend themselves to improve the experiences. As mentioned earlier, the new hiring practices were implemented in spring 2021 and again go to valuing diverse perspectives and inclusion, which are really at the forefront of these. And hiring managers were trained in spring 2021 on the elements of the practices to help move it forward and bring success to the policy and the practice. And there's ongoing monitoring that's occurring with the new hiring practices as well. Of particular relevance to new hiring, and something that you will likely hear more about going forward because it's relatively new in implementation and we'll likely see more of it in the future annual reports, is that the self-identification questions were implemented on job ads. So whether external candidates or internal candidates are applying for positions within the board, there are voluntary self-identification questions. And of course, that includes whether or not an individual self-identifies with a disability. So this information is critical to assist hiring managers in meeting the elements of the hiring practices and meeting the needs of the students in the school and the staff. So again, I think there'll be more to come on that, but I think it's certainly relevant when we're talking about the hiring practices. The staff census, as most of us are aware, it's not the first time hearing about it, but it was launched in spring 2021 as well. And that information is still well underway to be desegregated as we speak. The census included demographic data on those who may self-identify with disability as well. It also included questions around perceptual experiences, experiences with discrimination, harassment, mental well-being, staff well-being, relationships with co-workers and colleagues. So all of that information can be reviewed, and we're looking forward to collecting that. I think it will be really good information for the committee, the accessibility committee, as well as it relates to those who identify with a disability, because it also laid out, we'll also be able to take a look at the how it breaks out in the organization. So how many individuals who identify are at various levels or in various employee groups. So more to come on that as well. Accommodations continue to be offered through the Employee Health and Wellness Department. In the COVID context that we've been living the past few years, there have been an influx of requests for accommodations, certainly as it relates to PPE or requests due to immunocompromised or other medical restrictions that may exist. So that continues to be an offer for employees, current employees. And then accommodations are also continuing to be offered throughout the staffing and recruiting process. So from the point that an individual wants to apply to their interview, and certainly if an offer of employment is made in the course of employment, accommodations can be provided, and staff and applicants are well aware of that through the accommodation and staffing and recruiting process.
Thanks, General Manager Ippolito. Next few slides are mine. So Communications and Information Services has completed the migration of all remaining school websites to Google Suite sites, and that is AODA compliant. Joint training was hosted, and we are into, I guess, a monitoring and maintenance aspect of that training. Web content accessibility guidelines have been achieved. We are level AA compliant, and Accessibility is being utilized to monitor that level. So compliance was required by January 2021, and that was achieved. Next slide, please. In terms of the built environment, accessible washrooms were completed at Eastview, Glen Williams, Nelson, River Oaks, Surrey, McMillan, as well as a universal washroom being added at Nelson. A new elevator was also added at Nelson, and elevator renewal was completed at White Oaks on the North Campus. Fire alarm upgrades were completed with visual strobes at Pine Grove and W.I. Dick. Barrier-free access improvements, including ramps and site enhancements, were completed at Rolling Meadows and T.A. Blakelock at the front entrance. Leveraging the COVID resilient infrastructure stream from the provincial and federal government, 56 new accessible outdoor learning spaces are in the process of being delivered. Will be completed hopefully next spring and summer across the region. And the next slide shows a sample or a template of what we were using. We had three options for implementation at the schools, and the sketch there shows full shade trees with canopy. That's not necessarily included in all of these. We are trying to leverage the funding to add trees around what is shown there is armor stone seating, spaced, at least a few meters apart for accessibility on either asphalt or limestone screening pathway. And my apologies for the blurriness of the text there. I will read that to you. It is a limestone pathway. There's a minimum of 16 armor stones for seating, barrier-free wheelchair seating access, 2 meter separation between the seating assemblies, and trees and other plantings are being planted to support these spaces as budget permits. So this is an example of one of the first ones that we delivered that gained some high use after it was completed, and we saw community members accessing these very early on. Next slide. This one is TA Blakelock. Quite proud of this implementation. It was a nice collaboration between a couple of departments to develop and envision and leverage available funding for our Community Pathways program at TA Blakelock. And the next slide shows a bit of an aerial view of that full scope and depth and breadth of what we've provided in a space that was, I'll say, relatively poorly used. I think it was a cut-through pathway. So certainly leveraged the funding and leveraged the relationships within this board to deliver on a great programming space for our students. And with that, I think General Manager and I are prepared to take any questions if there's any.
Great. Thank you so much, Executive Officer Gadet and General Manager Ippolito. All right. Does anybody have any questions? You can raise your hand in the chat. Anyone can raise their hand in the chat to ask a question. All right, your presentation was so fulsome that everybody has all their mind filled with all the information. So this presentation will be coming back in the information items later in the evening. So if any questions come up during that time, maybe you can ask them then. But thank you very much for the presentation for both of you. Okay, we are now up to item 2.2, delegations, and we have no delegations for this evening. That brings us up to 3.0, which is the consent agenda items. Trustee Garretts, would you like to move a motion to deal with the consent agenda?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And Trustee Reynolds, would you like to second that?
Sure, thank you.
Great. All right, I'm going to put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action and information items and receive the information items for January 19th, 2022. Are there any items that need to be pulled for the discussion? So I'll go through the list, and as I go through the list, if you can let me know if there's anything you'd like to pull from those items, please. So first of all, there are the board minutes from January the 5th, the minutes from our special meeting on January the 12th, the order paper, the admin procedure, so any items that anybody would like to pull? If you can put your hand up in the chat, or should I just ask Trustee Vigilankara? I see her waving, so I think she has something she'd like to pull.
Yes, sorry about that. I would like to pull motion number M21-002 from the order piece.
All right, is there any other items that anyone would wish to be pulled? See no one waving their hands, I will pass the floor over to you, Trustee Vigilankara and Trustee Bow. I see her camera is on too, and you can let us know why.
Thank you. So we have pulled motion number M21-0102. In specific, we'd like to talk about the last resolution of that motion. So last year, the Board of Trustees passed an inclusive learning environment motion, and there were a number of commitments listed on the motion, including a resolution to request that the director establish a student equity committee at the board level. And some trustees may remember that we shared the idea for having a student equity committee at one of our committee of the whole meetings in May, in order to create a centralized forum for students in our board who are interested in equity work to share that work at a board level. So as a refresher, I'll read the resolution. Be it further resolved that the director be requested to establish an HDSB student equity committee for the purpose of engaging students in collaboratively identifying strategies to address concerns and identify actions to dismantle racism and other forms of discrimination in the HDSB. So this motion was unanimously passed by the Board of Trustees, and we'd just like to share some updates on the work that we've been doing with regards to the motion. So firstly, after the motion was passed, Trustee Evan Taylor and I, at the time the student trustee, along with our senators, worked on recommendations and potential guidelines for the Student Equity Committee. After we sent this to Superintendent Etoff and connected with System Principal Shalita Walker to begin reviewing the ideas in a small group. So at the start of the school year, Trustee Bao and I, along with our executive, Senator Garisha Sani, began meeting with System Principal Shalita Walker, and we reviewed the plans and recommendations that we made over the summer. And we've been meeting regularly to develop a draft of the committee's framework. So this includes the committee's purpose, mandate, roles, responsibilities, goals, etc. And this is a by youth for youth committee. So System Principal Walker has really just been there to provide guidance and a staff perspective, as well as an anti-oppression lens to the work that we're doing. Once the draft of our student recommendations is completed, the planning committee will present it to the department for additional feedback and recommendations, and we anticipate that the draft will be completed by the end of January and ready to present to the Human Rights and Equity Department in early February. Once the department has provided feedback, the planning committee would like to present the recommendations to the board, and the goal is to have it brought back to the board for feedback and further discussion, ideally before the end of February. In terms of long-term planning, we did initially want for this motion or for this committee to have started by the second semester, but given the ongoing disruptions of yet another unpredictable year, the planning committee has determined that the formation of the HDSB student committee will be in place by late spring 2022, and the actual committee will not begin their term until September 2022. So this time will provide the planning committee to work with the committee leaders and offer learning areas, understanding the board processes, work on some training related to human rights and equity, as well as using an equity toolkit to help inform our work. There's quite a bit of work left to do, but we are happy to provide this update and answer any questions or comments by trustees. We just really wanted to highlight the work that we've done so far and bring this back to the attention of the Board of Trustees, because this was a really significant commitment that our board made last year, and we would definitely like to see it through.
Great, thank you so much, Trustee Vigilankara. Does anybody have any questions or additional pieces of information to add to what Trustee Vigilankara has shared with us today?
Through you, Chair, just to say that as a senior team, we are very supportive of the work of the Student Equity Committee, and through Superintendent Rob Etoff and our Assistant Principal Walker, we are definitely going to continue to do everything we can to make sure that this becomes the reality as it was proposed in the motion. So I want to thank Trustee Vigilankara, Trustee Bao, and all of the students, Senate, and those who worked on this and are working on it. And we will continue to provide the kinds of supports that are needed at a system level.
Great, thank you so much, Director Ennis. All right, thank you very much, Vigilankara, for that update. I think that was overdue. It was really great to hear of all the work you have been doing. I do have one little kind of question. You talk about the planning committee and then the members of the committee that will come. How do you have any idea how you will choose those members of the committee?
So that's part of what we've been discussing. We want to make sure that it's a really equitable process. We were discussing, well, maybe the principals should decide who represents their school on the equity committee for the board, but there might be equity barriers involved in having principals decide. There might be, implicit bias involved. So we want to ensure that the students who are interested in this work and who are passionate about this work and who have been trying to come present at board meetings and share their work at a board level have the opportunity to serve on the committee. And that includes our priority really is to include students who come from underrepresented and underserved communities. So with that in mind, we're still determining how the selection process will actually look.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for the update, and I look forward to hearing more. So thank you so much. All right, is there anything else that needs to be dealt with the consent agenda items? Great. Okay, so seeing none, let's go over to our voting page and cast our votes on approving the consent agenda items for this evening, please. What are we missing? Great. That's awesome, and that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We are now up to item 5.0, ratification or action items. 5.1 is approval of business transacted in private session. Vice Chair Harrison, do we have any business from private session that requires approval?
Hello, thank you. No, we don't tonight. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We're now up to the place where we have shifted the student trustee report. So as requested at the beginning of the meeting, we have amended the agenda and moved the student trustee report ahead. So following the report, if Trustee Vigilant-Carr or Bao have any questions, Director Ennis, would it be okay if they ask them following their report?
Through you, Chair Shuttleworth, that would be okay.
Great. Thank you so much. Trustee Vigilant-Carr and Trustee Bao, the floor is yours.
So good evening again, trustees and staff. Hope you're all doing well since our last meeting. At our last Senate meeting, we worked on goal setting for the year, and senators began brainstorming some events and initiatives for the year that the subcommittees will be working on. During our joint session, we passed a motion to approve of our executive council as well as our co-chairs for the subcommittees this year. Superintendent Etoff and System Principal Shalita Walker joined us and gave us an update on our plans for the Indigenous Realities and Awareness Subcommittee for our Senate. And this year we'll be focusing on educating ourselves, the senators, and students on Indigenous realities, and hope to have some Indigenous voices on the committee. We also met with our executive council and regional representatives to plan our initiatives for the year. Some initiatives that our Senate leaders are pursuing include creating a volunteer hub on our Senate website to share volunteer opportunities with students in the community, working on mental health education campaigns to inform students of resources like the CYCs and social workers, reviewing APs that are of interest to students, and following through on commitments made in the student-led climate emergency declaration. Lastly, last Thursday, we met with Director Ennis and Associate Director Bogue to discuss some of the student-led walkouts that took place in a couple schools in our board. We were accompanied by our student senators Ethan, Vivian, and Madeline from Dr. Frank J. Hayden and Joanna from Nelson High School. During this meeting, our senators provided some insights on the student concerns at their school, and some students raised concerns related to anti-bullying and discrimination, transparency, accountability, awareness of the escalation process, school culture, and bridging the gap between admin and students. Our senators have expressed interest in reviewing the admin procedures and protocols related to these topics, and they're also planning on raising more awareness of these board processes and resources, such as the escalation process, so that we can better address student concerns in the future. I'll pass it over to Trustee Bao to deliver the rest of the report.
Thank you, Trustee Vigilant-Carr. So yesterday, the Elementary and Secondary Student Senate met to finalize our Student Senate goals motion for the school year so that we can pass it at our next Senate meeting in February. We reviewed our notes that our senators provided from previous open floors regarding what they've heard from students from their schools, and we discussed the themes of equity and inclusion, Indigenous rights, environmental sustainability, mental health and well-being, and learning and achievement. We also met with our subcommittee co-chairs for the first time to introduce and orient them into their new roles. This year, we have selected Zainab Hussein and Maggie Wang as our mental health and wellbeing co-chairs, Kevin Zhao, Sabrina Nadim, and Alicia Norali as our equity and inclusion co-chairs, Prasan Agarwal and Yaramir Solja as our environmental leadership co-chairs, and Ira Paranis and Nisa Dalal as our learning and achievement co-chairs. We're very excited to see the incredible work our subcommittees will accomplish this year with our amazing leaders. For the past several months, Trustee Willinkar and I have been working with System Principal Shalita Walker and a secondary senator and a student very engaged in equity work in our community on recommendations for the Student Equity Committee that Trustee Willinkar spoke about previously. Last Monday, Trustee Willinkar and I met with Associate Director Bogues and Superintendent Salmini to discuss what the final 30% would look like for the semester. We had the opportunity to share questions we've received from students and got more information and clarification that we then shared with students through our Senate Instagram and email. And in terms of the final 30, we've heard a lot of positive responses from students about the fact that their final marks will not be negatively affected by the final 30. Students have also shared that they appreciate more flexibility during these times as not everyone feels comfortable to return to in-person classes right now. We have some questions related to this that we would like to ask for clarity and for the record, and I'll pass it back to Trustee Willinkara.
Before that, we can open it up to trustee questions and comments on our report.
Great, thank you so much, Trustee Bao and Trustee Vigilankara. All right, does anyone have any questions around the information given to us during the student trustee report this evening? Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to the student trustees. You mentioned that you had meetings with respect to the student walkouts that took place. And I just wondered whether there were any kind of key outcomes or learnings or insights from those sessions.
I can begin, and I'll pass it back over to Trustee Bao. I think one of the key learnings that we took from that meeting was that some of the issues that we're seeing in the schools relates back to transparency and communication with students. There seems to be a bit of a gap between students and admin. So, for example, when it comes to addressing if a major event happens at the school and students are impacted by it, they don't necessarily know how administration addresses it behind the scenes. And so that's an issue that a lot of our senators have brought up in the past and that they continue to bring up. And that was one of the subjects of the student walkout. So we discussed perhaps bridging that gap between admin and students, and maybe having more transparency and communication. As well, we also just discussed the fact that COVID has made it harder for us to develop relationships with staff at our schools and administrators at our schools, and school culture has definitely been negatively impacted by it. So we were discussing ways that the Senate, as well as the board, can sort of work on developing those relationships and that trust between staff and students, and just strengthening the school community overall. I have actually one more thing. I'll pass it over to Trustee Bao. But as well, we did discuss some of the APs and the processes, like the escalation process that exist in our board. Not all students are aware of those resources or the protocols that principals and other administrators take when they address issues in schools. So that leads to confusion and I guess miscommunication among students. And so one thing that we do want to do on the Senate this year is raise awareness for those resources and for those protocols. So if students know that if I have a complaint, I can go to I can go to my principal, and if my principal doesn't address that, I can go to the superintendent. The fact is that some students don't know that they can come and communicate to superintendents and other members of our board. And so once we, I guess, bring more awareness to that, we should hopefully have less instances where we're disrupting classes, and we can address those issues a bit more effectively.
Like Trustee Willinkara said, something that we really talked about during these meetings is the role that COVID plays in the rise of these student walkouts, and really how we can encourage and improve our student community spirit. And we also, like Trustee Willinkara said, the senators were very interested in, after the meeting, looking over some of our AP admin procedures and protocols. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you very much for having those meetings. It's great to raise the issues, and I feel like almost greater to continue the discussion and figure a way forward. And it sounds like that's what you and the rest of the group that was there did, and that's great. And I also appreciate that it's shared with me and with us, so I can also learn and hear what your perspectives are.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Harrison. Does anybody else have any questions? I was going to ask a similar question to Vice Chair Harrison, so I'm going to leave it because you really provided quite a great answer as to sort of what the result of those meetings were regarding the walkouts, and it's nice to see that hopefully we're moving forward in a positive way. So thank you very much, Trustee Vigilankara and Trustee Bao, for your wonderful report. Take this time now if you'd like. You can stay, of course, always, as you are more than welcome. But, oh, sorry, Trustee Vigilankara.
Would we be able to ask our questions now?
Oh, right. I'm so sorry. Yes. And so now you have questions for Director Ennis. I'm going to pass you back to you.
Yes, thank you so much. So as Trustee Bao noted, there have been many students concerned about returning to in-person learning. So we appreciate that the board has offered the option to continue participating in classes asynchronously from home. And over the past few days, we've received many concerned messages from students about the attendance policy for the short-term asynchronous option. So many students are being marked absent by their teachers and admin, and there seems to be a lot of confusion and inconsistency around the absence piece. As well, there seems to be some misunderstandings relating to the learning and testing accommodations for asynchronous students. So I have two questions relating to this, and I just wanted to ask for the record. So the first question, our understanding is that so long as students are learning asynchronously by either reviewing class content or submitting work, they will be marked as present even though they aren't physically present in the classroom. Is this correct? And is this information relating to the attendance policy for the short-term option outlined somewhere, either on the board website or in a memo that students can cite and refer to?
Thank you for the question, Trustee Vigilankara. I'm going to ask Associate Director Boga to take this question.
Yeah, thanks, Trustee Director Ennis, and a great question, Trustee Vigilankara. In terms of remote learning, what we are asking parents to do, and this has happened whenever we've had opportunities for remote learning, is to sort of declare that for their student, meaning they have a conversation with the principal, it gets documented so that we know that they are doing remote learning as opposed to just absent, because it's really got to be clear that way. If they have opted for remote learning for the next couple of weeks or a month, then they will be marked present. There may be some confusion. We've done some clarification with our principals, and so I think we have clarified. They will be marked present if they are participating. Of course, we do need to be careful. If a student has opted for remote but they just are not engaging, then there'll be follow up and some worry about, are they well, are they still connected to the school, and so there could be the potential to be marked absent. But without question, if they have opted for remote and they are participating actively, then they will be marked present.
Thank you. I appreciate that it was clarified with staff and admin. If I may just respectfully suggest, it might be helpful to post that attendance policy somewhere, because students continue to ask us where exactly it says that they'll be marked present, even if they're not in class. Just for clarity, transparency, communication, it might help to have that clearly outlined somewhere. I do have a second question relating to the short-term asynchronous option. So will there be accommodations like alternative evaluations or virtual testing provided by staff to replace the in-person evaluations? And how will staff accommodate students learning asynchronously so that they stay on track with the class? So, for example, would staff be expected to collaborate with students and families to develop appropriate accommodations like posting video lessons or class notes?
Through the chair, I'm going to ask Superintendent Salmini if she would respond to this question.
Yeah, through the chair to Trustee Vigilankara. Yes, students who choose the short-term remote option will be accommodated just like students who would be isolating for periods of time. And so if you're speaking about the final 30, teachers are selecting assessment tasks that can be done in both environments, both in class and remote. They don't need to be different assessment tasks. We're not asking them to do that, but tasks that can be done in both settings.
Okay, and just one last follow-up question. We've had a lot of concerned IB and AP students reaching out and asking whether this option is available to them as well, because I know in the past virtual learning hasn't been an option for IB and AP. So could you confirm that this is offered for all streams and programs?
Yeah, now typically in our virtual secondary school, we don't offer those programs, but in this short-term period, we ask students to work with the school administrators and staff at the school to talk about what that might look like for them.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it to Trustee Bao.
Oh, 1 second, sorry. Trustee Reynolds, do you have a question for Trustee Vigilankara?
Yes, thank you. Actually, through the chair, actually, this would actually just be a clarification on what I just heard. In terms of the students who perhaps are in iSTEM and who likely are choosing asynchronous during this for the short time. Does this apply to them as well as the IB and the AP students? Through the chair to Trustee Reynolds, yes, we would ask them also to work with the school staff to see what that would look like in that program for this short-term period.
Okay, Trustee Bao. Oh, sorry, Trustee Vigilankara. No, you're good. Trustee Bao.
Thank you. So I had a few questions regarding the snow day protocol. So we've received concerns regarding the timing of the announcements of snow days. We understand that some families and staff might leave early for school in the morning and would appreciate more notice. And we know that other boards like the TDSB and PDSB announced that there would be a snow day on Tuesday the night prior. So my question is, I'm just wondering, is there a reason why we can't do the same thing?
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Bao and to all the students who asked the question. It's always a difficult decision point when we are having to close schools. Oftentimes, the decision around transportation is not made to me as director until 5 a.m. in the morning. And so, there were school boards who knew before Monday morning that their transportations were canceled. So that gave them lead time that we didn't have. We didn't know until 5 a.m. on Monday morning the status of our transportation. And so that informed the decision from that point on. And I know Superintendent Pajabark and his team can speak to when we got it out. In fact, we heard from many that they were quite happy. Superintendent Pajabark, you want to speak to that?
Yes, I mean, if you look at our inclement weather guidelines, it actually is 6:30 in the morning that we commit to getting the final words out. We have a vast array of rural and urban, and it takes HSTS a long time to really get a sense of the full region and make calls through our transportation and make recommendations as well. We are aware we have early years programs starting as early as 7. This past time was actually one of our earlier ones. We had notice out just after 5:30 on Monday, a little later, closer to 6:10, I think 6:15 but still well within our 6:30. It's something we always review and can review in terms of, do we think we could expedite decisions a little bit more? I think we'll take it's very hard to switch gears mid-season, but it's always something we could look at. But there are many, many factors going in, and just the collaboration needed with other boards is, Director Ennis, he's the one who lives it. But it's, we don't want to rush a decision, and we aren't other boards, and they don't have our mix of climate differentials. Above the escarpment is a lot different than below, and we have very, very different zones. We have to take them all into account. So making good decisions takes time. If we had called it in Halton the night before, we would have had an awful lot of people faulting that. I mean, Monday was so extreme, the weather. I don't think, but many of our snow days or bus cancellations past have been a little more on the bubble and tougher to call. And so we're trying to get the best, most current data. If plows had got out and covered, or Halton wasn't as much snow as some of those other regions, we would have been really tap dancing to explain that. So all in all, at 6:30 is our commitment. We always meet that many times half an hour or better before, but we do try to get it out as soon as we can. And like I said, Monday we had it at 5:30. It's not like we're sleeping in and just don't want to make a call, and we know when we just don't want to tell anyone. So it's we do commit to that we can always take that back. So I'm happy to share that with our team.
Thank you so much, Director Ennis and Superintendent Pajubarek, for clarifying that and explaining the reasons and factors behind the timing. I had another question. So regarding the expectations of students on snow days. So I am wondering what the teachers can ask of students during a school day.
Thank you for the question, Trustee Bao. So in terms of what teachers can ask of students during snow day, we have a variety of different options of what can happen. So we committed ourselves as a board that when it's a snow day, we're going to have a true snow day, meaning it's going to be a day where where students were going to have learning on their own. It wouldn't be asynchronous learning that's assigned. You're going to be outside, you're going to be exploring, you're going to be enjoying the day. As I said on Monday, staff and students, prioritize yourself, your mental health, and your well-being. That's what the message I sent out. So I would expect that everyone took full advantage of that, both staff and students. And there are other times, such as Tuesday, yesterday, when the expectation was that staff would provide asynchronous learning opportunities for students, in which we asked staff to post by 10 a.m. Work that students can, if they so choose with their families, to engage in those learning opportunities. We do know that learning occurs in a variety of ways and in a variety of contexts. And you can learn when you're in school with your teacher, you can learn when you're online with a teacher, you can learn when you're by yourself with your family, you can learn when you're by yourself alone. So learning can happen in all of those different contexts. So it was quite clear from our vantage point, Trustee Bao, that Monday was a day for mental health and well-being. Tuesday was a day that we were easing back into learning through asynchronous, and then we were back today in full learning in person.
Thank you for emphasizing the fact that snow days are for mental health and well-being. I think that students really appreciate that. And as a follow-up, I just want to ask that, can, for example, teachers expect that a student, for example, completes a test during normal hours on a school day? Because that was something that occurred that we heard from students.
On a snow day, you meant?
Yes.
Wow. I was hopeful that everyone took full advantage of the mental health and well-being prioritization on that day, and that both students and staff would have taken full advantage of that and not assigned any work on that day.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Trustee Bao. I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the Monday snow day. I think even where we are right now in terms of COVID and not really being able to go out and see people, that snow day provided the opportunity for kids to get out and play. I know for our family, I call my younger guy, my grade 8 was able to go out whereas he's been stuck inside at home with his computer doing his work. So it was really nice to have that opportunity. So I really did appreciate that, as you said, Trustee Bao, that a snow day is a snow day. So thank you very much, Director Ennis. Trustee Bao and Trustee Vigilankara, are there any other questions you might have for staff or trustees? No? Great. Well, thank you so much for your presentation and for your questions. I think you gave some enlightenment to all of us as well. Good luck with studying and everything that's going on with the final 30. Although I know you said you're aware that it can't degrade your mark, I'm sure you would still like to improve it. So best of luck with everything that you're doing. And thank you very much for your early report. Okay, we are now back to regular things, and we are up to 5.3 action items for January the 19th. So as per our agenda this evening, we have 2 items. Item number 1 is report 22013, the board committee policy review brought forward by Trustee Rocha and Trustee Collard. Trustee Rocha or Collard, do you have anything that you would like to speak to about this?
Yes, through you, Chair, I can give a preamble of what the report is and our ask. So part of our role as trustees is the governance of the board, which includes reviewing board policies. As such, there is a policy and its accompanying governance procedure that is due for review. Falls within the 3-year mark. And that is the board committee's policy and board committee's governance procedure. And as such, we do require a subcommittee to be created in order to assemble trustees to review both these documents.
Great. Thank you very much. I will read the motion and then open the floor. So be it resolved that a subcommittee of the Governance Standing Committee be struck to review the board committee policies and the board committee governance procedure. The subcommittee shall report to the committee of the whole in April of 2022. Trustee Rocha, would you like to move this motion?
Yes, I would.
And Trustee Collard, would you like to second it?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay, is there any discussion or debate surrounding this motion? Great. Seeing none, if you can pop on over to the voting form and cast your votes, please. And I'm just going to confirm, I think both the student trustees have left. Trustee Oliver, are you aware? I can't tell. Yes? So if they have, that carries unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, we're now on to the next report, which is report 22014, the Trustee Code of Conduct Policy Review, again brought by Trustee Rocha and Trustee Collard. Would either of you like to speak to this?
Sure, I could speak to it. So same rationale as before. It's within our purview to be reviewing our policies within 3 years. We will need to create a subcommittee to review the Trustee Code of Conduct. This committee will also look at extrapolating the procedure that's embedded in the policy and creating a separate Trustee Code of Conduct governance procedure. And our request is to create the subcommittee. What I failed to mention with the first request with the board committee's policy, as well as this one, we are looking for trustees to participate in these subcommittees. At the committee of the whole last week, a few trustees have expressed interest. And in case any other trustees would like to come forward this evening or tomorrow, if you could send an email to either myself or Trustee Collard, being that you do approve this motion. And with that, I will pass it on to you, Chair Shuttleworth.
Great.
Can I just make one comment?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Trustee Collard.
Because we're meeting just trustees, we must not reach quorum. So each subcommittee can have no more than 5 trustees on it.
Great. I will read the motion and then open the floor for questions and debate. So be it resolved that the subcommittee of the Governance Standing Committee be struck to review the trustee code of conduct and develop an accompanying governance procedure. The subcommittee shall report to the committee of the whole in April of 2022. And I'm going to reverse it. Trustee Collard, would you like to move this motion?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, and Trustee Rocha, would you like to second it?
Yes, please.
Great. Is there any debate? All right, seeing none, pop on over to your voting forms and cast your votes, please. Great, and that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, we are now up to communication to the board. The trustee student report has already been done, so we're now on to action items, which is the school year calendar for 2022-2023, report 22011. Associate Director Bogue, did you have any information you'd like to share regarding this?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to trustees, just a few comments. I'm very happy to present the school year calendar for next year. I want to thank Trustee Rocha and Collard for their participation in the calendar development on the school year calendar committee. Much appreciated. And they may have some comments. The school year calendar is really a collaboration. We have our school year calendar committee. We work with our coterminous board next door. Admin Council weighs in on the calendar throughout the process as well to try to get a calendar that really meets the needs of our kids in our system and our schools, our families for the following year. We look at days of significance and where they land within the calendar. We look at other significant events that might be occurring in our communities. For example, this year we looked at the municipal election in October. The calendar that is shared for trustees to review right now is really a more typical calendar of our pre-COVID years. We did plan for a regular school year calendar next year, a regular semestered year in high school, and the calendar looks similar to years gone by. I'm happy to answer any questions that trustees might have, and I'm sure Trustee Rocha and Collard may be able to answer some questions or may have some comments as well.
All right, Trustee Rocha or Collard, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I can add something. I just wanted to say that attending the meeting, there was good dialogue, weighing the pros and cons of where the PA Day fell, PA Days, plural, fell. So I did appreciate the going back and forth, the assessing the value of where days were placed, and also the representation from all of the impacted parties, including parents from the different areas. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Trustee Rocha. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Associate Director Bogue or Trustee Rocha or Collard? Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. If the calendar is approved, what is the process for communicating the information to the community, and when will that happen? I understand we have to send the results to the ministry on a certain timeline as well.
Thanks, Trustee Vice Chair L. Harrison. Through the chair to all trustees, we need to submit our calendar to the ministry by March the 1st this year. That's a change in timing from in the past. The regulation changed. What we typically do is once the board has approved the calendar, we start to put out joint communication with our Catholic board next door as well. They're on track. We've aligned. I believe they brought their calendar last night to their board meeting, and it'll come back in 2 weeks. We try to do that communication jointly so that our communities here at about the same time. The messaging that goes out goes to every family, and Superintendent Padre-Barrick may want to weigh in here as well. We don't sort of print materials and solidify it until we have approval from the ministry, which happens a little bit later in the spring. So we've never had an issue with the ministry. They've always supported the calendars that we've submitted, but we do communicate and say that it's pending ministry approval.
All right, thank you. Trustee Rocha.
Yes, through you, Chair. I wanted to ask if perhaps Associate Director Bogue wanted to just highlight the change to the winter break. It's what's being proposed is a little different than past years, and that might catch some people off guard.
Sure, thanks, Trustee Rocha. Through the chair to all trustees. The winter break, this is kind of an unusual year in that we have some flexibility around that winter break. The ministry regulation sort of prescribes where the ministry's recommended break would land, and their recommendation actually is from December the 19th to January 2nd inclusive. And that's just based on the regulation because it's so many days after the last Monday in after December 19th, I believe. I have to double check that. Anyway, their recommendation was to have an earlier break. This happens about every 7 years or so. We did this, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago when we had a similar calendar. Most of the local boards, in fact, we canvassed Hamilton, Niagara, Halton Catholic, obviously Peel. Peel then canvassed Toronto and their surrounding boards. Oh, we canvassed Upper Grand as well. And the feeling was that folks generally like to have the breaks a little bit later than earlier. And so the decision was to recommend having the break starting on the 23rd of December. Really, the break officially would start more on the 26th, or sorry, the 26th, the Monday. But we thought that extra board holiday just before, because it is a little tight to Christmas for those that celebrate Christmas. So that families who do celebrate Christmas after Christmas, they've got a little bit more break to relax and enjoy the winter weather and so on. So that is fairly consistent to my knowledge with all the surrounding boards. We do sometimes run into a bit of a, it's not a predicament, but it's a challenge for some staff that work in one board but have their kids attend another board. And that's why we canvassed other boards to see what their thinking was. And I think we don't know, of course, until all the calendars are approved, but I think we're all in alignment there. So Trustee Rocha, I hope that makes sense, and I hope that captures the explanation that we shared at the calendar committee.
All right. I'll read the motion, and if there are any further questions, we'll come back to it after that.
Point of order, this is for next week.
Oh,
is this not for next week? Yeah.
February 2nd. Haha. I'm sorry, that was my mistake. Thank you, Trustee Collard. All right, are there any other questions then this evening regarding the school year calendar? All right, so just a message to everybody out there. You have 2 weeks to have a look at the calendar, and it will be coming back to the board in 2 weeks for us to vote on its completion. Thank you very much, Associate Director Bogue, Trustee Collard, and Trustee Rocha for all your work on this. Okay. Okay, we are now up to information reports for January 19th, 2022. So earlier this evening, we heard about the AODA Annual Accessibility Status Report. Executive Officer Gadet was the lead. Is there anything further, Executive Officer Gadet, that you would like to add regarding this information?
Nothing further at this time, Chair Shuttleworth, unless there's any questions.
All right, and that was my next question. Did anybody have any questions that came to mind since we've had the presentation earlier in the meeting? Great, well, thank you so much, General Manager Ippolito, for coming and helping out, and thank you, Executive Officer Gadet, for the information overview. All right, we are now on to 6.5, the Director's Report. Director Ennis, I will pass it over to you. Right now we have 3 points on this: vaccine compliance and masking protocols, return to school, and other. So I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Shuttleworth, and to the rest of the trustees. Good evening again. The Director's Report this evening, I'm going to start with Superintendent Taha to give us an update on vaccine compliance.
Thank you, Director Ennis. Good evening, everyone. Through you, Chair Shuttleworth, to the rest of the board. With respect to vaccination compliance, we continue to manage the disclosure process in accordance to the direction and instructions of the Chief Medical Officer of Public Health and the Ministry of Ed. Our vaccination rates are holding steady district-wide at 90% for our staff. And for our permanent staff, our vaccination rates are approximately 95.5% in terms of fully vaccinated. The definition of fully vaccinated has not changed. It remains those who receive two approved doses of the vaccine are considered fully vaxxed. Nonetheless, the ministry has recently advised school boards that they will begin the collection of, for informational purposes only, third dose information for staff. So if you are a recipient of a third dose, you now have the opportunity to attest to that on a voluntary basis. Our employee self-service portal is ready to accept those affirmations from our staff, and it was launched this afternoon. And as of end of day to date, approximately 23% of our staff who are fully vaxxed have affirmed that they've received their third dose. And we will continue to administer the compliance program with rapid testing, and the reporting of the third dose information will begin to the ministry as of tomorrow. And that's the update for vaccination compliance. In terms of the N95 masks, as reported to the board at the last board meeting, staff have received from the Ministry of Education N95 masks, and now that's a second option for staff in terms of personal protective equipment. You have the option to don an N95 mask or continue with the grade 2 medical masks, and those masks have been delivered to schools courtesy our procurement department and our facilities department. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Superintendent Taha. Does anyone have any questions regarding vaccine compliance or masks within the schools? Seeing none, Director Ennis.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chair Shuttleworth. I'm going to ask Superintendent Taha if he would just continue with staff shortages.
Thank you, Director Ennis. Through you, Chair Shuttleworth, to the rest of the trustees. I'm very proud and happy to say that we managed to effectively navigate the staff shortages challenge before us on day one of in-person learning. To put it in context, our in-school staff are roughly 6,000 individuals. This is an approximation. And based on our absenteeism today or staff shortages today due to illness or self-isolation, roughly 10% of our staff were unable to make it to work for those reasons. We were able, through a variety of interventions, to fill those vacancies, and 90% of those vacancies were filled through our supply staff. The HR department and other departments have been working very hard pre-break in preparation for this, in anticipation of these shortages. So, the hard work and the efforts of school ops, the senior team, HR, and others have paid off. It's only day one, but I'm very optimistic. And as I just said, 90% of our vacancies were filled by casual staff, and the remaining 10%, we were able to fill them through internal staff at schools, such as LRTs, IPLs, and centrally assigned staff. So very encouraging. We'll keep an eye on these numbers, and we continue to monitor them and sort of adjust strategy accordingly. Also of note, we are able to, as of this Friday, deploy 120 floater LTOs, long-term occasionals, who will be all hands on deck for our schools to cover any vacancies that we are unable to fill through the call-out system. So very encouraging sign on day one. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Trustee Grabetz, you have a question.
Thank you very much for your report. I was very, as you went through, I was very happy to hear that all the replacement staff are staff, because I've been receiving concerns from parents about the reports in other boards that there are temporary hires of parents potentially minding students in other boards, and there is a concern about safety and vulnerable sector screening and all sorts of things. So it's great to hear that we are not doing that as a practice. Thank you very much.
If I may, Chair Shuttleworth, just respond to, I know Trustee Grabetz didn't ask a question, made a comment, but I'd ask Superintendent Todd to speak to that, because we've had a number of parents and community members ask that very question. And so let's respond.
Thank you, Director Ennis. Through you, Chair Shuttleworth, to Trustee Grabetz. Yes, as you may be aware, there are a variety of measures or interventions a school board may take, to ensure the safety and well-being of students, and to ensure that at the very minimum that students are supervised. And some boards have, desperate times call for desperate measures, may have resorted to parent volunteers or calling uncertified emergency staff. We have not reached that level of desperation, knock wood. With respect to hiring emergency uncertified staff, so those are individuals who have completed their Bachelor's of Education, yet they have not been certified by the Ontario College of Teachers, through the paperwork and the bureaucratic process. We have added some teachers to our supply list for subject-specific areas such as French, but with other disciplines, we've been very lucky and very proactive in terms of ongoing recruitment and hiring well before the break, again, in anticipation of this. So again, as Director Ennis pointed out, it's a tool available to us in the toolbox, but hopefully we won't have to reach those measures, but you never know. It's day one. And again, the senior team, school operations, HR, business services, and others, we've had a plan in place well before the break. And again, anticipating the worst, thinking about it, what could go wrong. And so far, so good. So we'll see how next week, I think next week should be better, because our floater LTOs will be fully deployed. So again, fingers crossed.
Can I actually have a follow-up?
Go ahead.
Okay, I know that school bus drivers are not school staff, but people, the community, think of them along the same kind of lines. Are we having issues with school bus drivers who are, again, you can't replace school bus drivers just on a whim? Are we having issues with school bus drivers' attendance rates?
Thank you for the question, Trustee Grabetz. I'm going to ask Superintendent Nagoy to respond to that.
And thank you for the question. And through the chair, we do see higher rates of absent rates as a result of isolation and other guidelines. We do not have a large pool of supply bus drivers. It takes a lot of time to train a driver, and it is quite difficult if the prolonged isolation period is 5 days, for example. It's a little different than a daily schedule of filling in these routes. And yes, we do see quite a few more routes that are being delayed. Actually, I do have a bit of an update later on in terms of some of the delays, and we also see bus route cancellations as we do not have enough drivers to supplement for those that are not able to make it.
Thank you. And I look forward, but not really look forward to hearing that report.
Great, thank you very much. Director Ennis, will you continue?
Thank you so much, Chair Shuttleworth. I just want to speak to the inclement weather and the return to school and the snow days that we've had the past couple of days. I know that student trustee Villankara and Bao asked some questions pertaining to this earlier, but I just wanted to flesh it out a little bit more. Before I begin, I just want to say a big thanks to all the staff who work tirelessly, our caretaking staff and our facility staff, to make sure that all our buildings or facilities or parking lots or walkways are cleared and ready for staff and students. And I want to just really thank them. I want to thank all of our senior staff, our principals and vice principals, and our teaching staff and non-teaching staff, and everyone who contributes to the operation of the Halton District School Board for the great work that they have done throughout these last few days and last few weeks. As you know, this is the third year that has been impacted by COVID. It's only 2 calendar years, but it's been 3 school years. And so what I find is that staff and students, they're exhausted. They truly are. And, they have really given their all. And so when the opportunity came on Monday that we had a very significant snowfall, as everyone know. I think I heard Pearson Airport said this was the 3rd largest single day snowfall they had since 1937. I mean, that just puts it in perspective. So many of us haven't been alive that long. And so I saw the gravity of the situation, and based on the conversation that I've had with senior team and the decisions that we've had before, I think everyone agreed that school on Monday was not safe. It was not safe for anyone, and it would not have been a wise decision. So knowing that staff were exhausted, knowing that it wouldn't be a wise decision, knowing that it wasn't safe, I made the call that we were going to go to no school, everything was closed, and that it was going to be a mental health and well-being day for everyone. As some of you know, I put out a tweet that said, "It's the first snow day in the Halton District School Board. Students and staff, prioritize yourselves and your mental health and well-being today and breathe. Thank you for all you've done. We're going to get through this." And I saw it as an opportunity to really ask staff to take care of themselves because they have really and truly given their all. Well, you wouldn't believe the kind of feedback that I've gotten on those simple words. I mean, from staff members telling me that they were brought to tears and moved to tears because of these words, just how we care as a board about them, about their mental health and well-being. And so, it has literally gone viral, as some would say. Almost 400,000 impressions with these particular words, and so many people congratulating us as a board for taking care of our staff and our students. And so, I know that everybody agreed with Monday's decision. I think it was the day 2, yesterday, Tuesday, where some were starting to wonder, are we going to go back to school in person or not? Of course, I was woken up by the 5 a.m. phone call to tell me about the status of the transportation, and knowing that many of our transportation just could not be on the road. As you know, The roads are still not clear, and some of the side streets and sidewalks are just not clear. I mean, I see even today I saw people walking on the streets because the sidewalks are not clear. So it's still not very completely safe. So yesterday, I mean, I know someone who was on a bus for 11 hours stuck on the streets yesterday. So it still was not safe for our students and staff. And so, as a director, I take it very seriously, the mental health and well-being and the physical health and well-being of our staff and students. And so, as a compromise, because we did say that snow days were going to be true snow days, we moved to asynchronous learning. And so we had, the teachers post work for students. And then, as I stated earlier to Trustee Vidalankara, I believe that learning happens in a variety of ways and in a variety of contexts. And so I don't subscribe to dismissing learning opportunities, in whatever form they come. So it could be in person, it could be asynchronous, it could be synchronous, it could be exploring, it could be playing. There's learning through play. There's all kinds of learning and methodologies of learning. And so I liked what one parent said. She said, "This is not learning loss. This is joy." This is just sort of expresses the emotions that were tied up in the last 2 days. And I know some were asking, well, we had 2 days of snow day. Can we take back some of the PA days that are upcoming to make up for these days? The answer to that is that these PA days were collectively bargained. We've agreed to them. They've been placed in the calendar. The calendar has been approved by the ministry, and we're bound to follow that. We cannot take them away. We are obligated to offer them. And so we are not going to be taking away any days that's upcoming. I think those are sacred. And so we look forward to the continuation of learning. I want to see students back in the building as they were today. I know that students want to be back in the building. They've told me that that's how they learn best, that's how they socialize best, and that it does a lot for their mental health and well-being. So I, like most parents, want to see them in school, in person, in learning. Of course, also recognizing that there are some families who've chosen to learn virtually, and we respect and support that as well. So that was basically the decision-making that happened over the last couple of days. And I'm just happy that students are back. We have the staff complement to support their learning in person. And I just wanted to offer that. I'll take any questions on that.
Thank you, Director Ennis. Is that your report?
No, I do
Okay.
have some others.
Okay. Does anyone have questions? I guess so. This is really regarding the snow day-ish pieces. Okay, I think
We discussed it earlier, so yes. Awesome.
All right. Thank you, Director. Continue on, please.
Thank you so much, Chair Shuttleworth. The infamous others, we've got a number of items. I've got both Superintendent Blackwell and Superintendent Nagoy, who are going to be supporting me through the remainder of the updates. Superintendent Nagoy, the RAT test distribution.
Thank you. And for the chair to all trustees, just a quick update with regards to the rapid antigen test kits that we've received late on Friday afternoon. They have been sent to schools between today and tomorrow. All schools should be receiving them and distributing them to students soon after that. We did not receive the full allocation. We only received enough tests for the elementary students and staff, child cares, and bus drivers. So we are starting with these groups and the elementary panel, and we're still waiting to get confirmation on the next delivery of rapid antigen tests that will serve our secondary panels, secondary students and staff. And I had one more with regards to transportation update. In terms of our buses, they were mostly on time and running well, but we did have some cancellations. We had 7 routes that had to be canceled as a result of driver shortages, as well as about 11% of our routes have experienced delays on the first day back. Thank you.
Trustee Collard.
Thank you. Through you to the director. So when a bus route gets canceled, how do children get to school?
Thank you, Trustee Collard. I'm going to ask Superintendent Ngoy to speak to that.
That is an excellent question and extremely difficult to answer. This is new for Halton, not for other regions. For us, it is a new communication that we sent out to families to continue to review our delays / cancellation notices as we are managing this pandemic. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for that. It is up to each family in terms of the means of how they could reach school. And in some cases, the cancellations may be multi days as a result of the period for which the drivers may be absent as a result of isolation. We are working very hard to make sure that we move around those drivers, that the spare drivers, as well as permanent drivers, to those routes that are impacted, so that we don't impact too long the same students or the same school.
May I have a follow-up?
Go ahead.
So I'm curious then, when would families be notified that the transportation for the day has been canceled?
Would the chair please respond, Superintendent Ngoy?
Thank you. We try to do it as early as possible, the day before if possible. Sometimes we have very short notice, and it might be the morning of, just in line with how we would postpone, we would post the some of the delays. But we are trying our best to do it the night before if we do have that information, or if it is one of the planned reallocations that we do in the background.
Thank you for this. I know that there's not much that we can do. We can't drive the buses for them, but this has got to be adding stress to families. And I'm surprised I actually haven't heard from many families about the bus cancellation. So perhaps my schools weren't impacted today, but they will be at some point, I'm sure. And so, yeah, I hope that this is short and that once we get through Omicron in a quick fashion, we'll be back up and running properly.
Thank you, Trustee Collard. Trustee Garrett.
Thank you. Through you. I'm just wondering how many students this is impacting at this point, the shortage of bus drivers.
Through the chair, Superintendent Ngoy.
So at this point, I don't have an actual total number. I do know that it's potentially, so for the 7 routes, it's 3 or 4 of our schools. That does not mean the entire school, because it's different buses that brings students from different neighborhoods to the same school. It is hard to say, but I probably a couple of hundred students, if I had to guess. So a significant number overall, for sure.
Thank you, Trustee Garrett. Director Ennis.
Thank you, Chair Shuttleworth. I'm going to ask Superintendent Blackwell to take the next 2 items, vaccines and case and contact management.
Thank you, Director Ennis, and through the chair to all trustees. Some exciting news. We continue to be very high in our vaccination rates. As you know, our 12 to 17-year-olds, the vaccination rates have been very high. We're at 95%. So families, when you're thinking of your kids returning, our vaccination rates of their peers are very high. We have 62%. Yes, kudos to Halton Region Public Health. They've done a phenomenal job, and kudos to our families for stepping up and accessing those resources. We have 62% of our 5 to 11-year-olds with 1 dose. And the exciting piece is that the second doses have now started. So 10% of our 5 to 11-year-olds have a second dose of the vaccine at this time. Public health, as I come and share this data with you, public health anticipates that will rise very quickly. Families will have received an email we shared and lots of communication. And we know that there's lots coming at you. You would have received an email on Friday, a letter from Dr. Magani, who is our Chief Medical Officer of Health. Halton Region has opened up 5,000 more appointments for pediatric appointments in January alone. So we would encourage families to book through the information that was provided to them on Friday, and at any time it's posted on the Halton Region website. We have heard about vaccine clinics in elementary schools and using schools. We have, as you know, we speak weekly with Halton Region Public Health. We met with them twice last week regarding vaccinations for 5 to 11-year-olds. And the strategy that we are using has put us with the 5 to 11-year-olds third highest in the province. It's a very successful strategy. Just for context, when we do grade 7 immunizations and go from school to school to school, just one grade cohort traveling from school to school takes 3 months. So by stopping the processes that they're using now and set up takedown every time into different schools is not the best strategy at this time when we see that we have availability and we have a process in place that we employed last year, one that ensures equity of access for our families. We worked with families last year where, and obviously with their consent, to help support vaccination appointments, getting families to vaccination clinics, making sure that appointments could be booked where there are multiple students in a family just for access. That is something that will continue. We will be looking at data with our Halton Region partners frequently, where we would see if there are a need for uptake in the school setting. We definitely would be looking to that strategy. A couple of really important points to think about around, one of the things is around consent. And so we would not be providing vaccinations without parents in our buildings with some of our younger students, right? We know that for some students, they may see this as a painful procedure and associate it with a school setting, which could have implications in returning to a school building for any amount of time for some students, which is something that, you know, for those of you that have seen in the news, the pediatric clinics are phenomenal. The strategies, they work with young students. So you know, those settings are well established and lots of success and lots of fun as well. So in terms of many of those reasons, the inefficiency with putting clinics right in a school setting during the school day is not something that is being considered right now. We've always had booking outside of the Ontario booking system. We've got our own Halton Region booking. So we do pretty darn well in Halton with the strategies that we use with our Halton Region Public Health partners and our coterminous board. You'll recall last year that we did access some facilities, school facilities, and work to ensure that it was available for both boards. So it's not off the table, but it's right now we're not finding that there is a lack of opportunity for families and appointments. So we'll continue. We'd really like to make sure that families are aware of the appointments, continue to look at Halton Region Public Health website. They're doing a great social media campaign. And obviously there's lots of conversation in terms of availability through your own healthcare provider as well. So that's where we are with respect to 5 to 11-year-old vaccinations. And I'd be happy to take any questions at this time on that before I move on to the next thing.
Great, thank you. Trustee Gribbins.
Thank you very much through you, Chair. So I've been watching the vaccination rates through the Halton Region website. It's wonderfully clear. We have a very transparent region with the rates that are posted, along with all sorts of other excellent information. And so I was so happy to see that, our vaccination rates for our 12 to 17-year-olds are sky high at 95%. And I have been watching since the announcement of the approval of the shot for, or the vaccination for the 5 to 11-year-olds. And in the beginning, wow, it was shooting skywards again. And I was happy to see so many of our families taking up the vaccination, working really hard to find appointments, etc. But I have noticed in the past week and a half, actually, since the break has ended, the holiday break ended, that vaccinations have really plateaued in that age group. And I was wondering, is there any targeted education program from the government that really shows parents the safety and efficacy of the vaccine for that specific age group? I was just wondering if you're aware of any program.
So thank you for the question, through the chair to Trustee Grabent. One of the things that public health is discussing is around the promotion, and many of the materials that they have are, we have their little videos for kids, and at an age appropriate videos as well. That's a strategy that they think that they have not maximized at this point or optimized, and that's something that will be really promoted in the next couple of weeks. So in terms of the communication strategy and awareness of what's available and how they can get support in accessing some of the other services that are available to them.
Okay, so it is a regional approach that's sort of happening. Nothing at the provincial level through the ministry or anything like that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can take it back and ask, because we meet every week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Please continue, Superintendent Blackwell.
So moving on to case and contact management. Great. Okay, so lots of conversation around case and contact management in the media, for sure. I think it's important just to give a little bit of context. So we've always followed the direction of public health and the Ministry of Education around, the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education around case and contact management. And you'll recall that when we started with case and contact management, one of the reasons that we had this process was around the state of the virus at that time, that we did not have vaccines available to us. The strategy was containment. And so part of the processes that we did case and contact management was around identifying high-risk contacts. If you'll recall, in the early days, dismissing students that sat close by. Then we moved to class dismissals. It became very frequent to dismiss without any low risk or high risk designation when we had a variant called Delta. We now have this variant called Omicron. And public health, or Dr. McGanny did share a letter. We've passed it on through to our families. I think it's really important for families to take the time to read through that letter. And part of it in that letter, she talks about the Omicron variant and its increased transmissibility. So we talked about containment. Now we're talking about a virus or a variant that is very transmissible. It is not able to be contained. So it's resulted in an exponential rise in cases in Ontario, and it's very much associated with a low rate of severe disease. So especially in vaccinated individuals, we're positioned very well in Halton, as we just talked about vaccinations. You'll have seen that public health is no longer dismissing classes, which was one of the containment strategies in Omicron. So having coordinated personally and with my colleagues, these processes within our schools that I'm talking about, case and contact management, where we would have cases reported, additional reporting processes that we had outside of the guidance, the request to have those additional processes outside of the guidance that we've just received would be problematic given the very speculative voluntary data that this would be based on. So reporting without a PCR test or a confirmed laboratory test is going to be very different. We're asking families right now, as they're doing their screening daily, to consider themselves presumed cases with 2 or more lesser symptoms or one of the more severe symptoms. We're also saying if you have a rapid antigen test positive, you're a presumed case, and also looking at a PCR self-collection test, you're a presumed case. There is very much the process outside of the process that we've been told. I don't know if that makes sense. The process outside of the process. The expectation of reporting outside of the process that we have with controls is prone to inaccuracy in that we no longer have a lab-based test to confirm a positive result. So when we talk about notifying families, in the past, it was based on a confirmed result, and we determined, public health determined a period of communicability. So many reported cases to schools, we would report to public health, and they were not communicated to families because public health was able to determine based on a test result and the date the child was in school or a staff member was in school, that the case was not on site during their period of communicability. So there were lots and lots of cases that we did not send letters home for families, right? Because we had all of the pieces in place to define whether or not it was a confirmed case. Practically, when we consider now the case notifications for incomplete data could lead to notices going home daily to most classes in most schools, right? Someone's away. I'm presuming that they're away because they've got a couple of symptoms. They're presuming they have COVID. There's no PCR test, but we do have a process where we've asked that they stay home. They're following the isolation requirements because case and contact management also includes the requirements for isolation, not only for the positive or presumed case, but also for their family members, which is strengthened in the latest guidance. So since January 5th, which was a Wednesday, 2 weeks ago, we've had students with significant special education needs in our buildings, participating in in-person learning in our schools with many different pieces in play, right? We've got revisions to our isolation requirements for presumed cases and their household members. We've reinstated the screening requirements. The screening has been updated as well to reflect some of the changes. Masking, obviously, hand hygiene, and also the availability of rapid antigen tests. So there are many protocols that are in play as well on a regular basis in a world where we are living with exposure. And as Dr. Magani has stated in the past, and maybe it was Dr. Moore publicly, when you leave your house, you are at risk of exposure. We no longer are using the term high risk, except for in high risk settings. That's where public health is using that definition. So for families that were in our system and have received letters, the high risk letters that are sent would no longer be sent in any case. Possible exposure. We know there's possible exposure. On any given day, when you leave your home, there's possible exposure. So that's the lens in terms of what we're notifying and letting families know. But what we are doing is reporting. And I think that families, when they see the reporting that we are doing, we're reporting absence data by school. It is going to be completed daily. It will be reported provincially, and it will be available starting Monday, January 24th, at ontario.ca. We also have an obligation and a process now that we work through with Halton Region Public Health when schools reach a 30% threshold. Principals have a reporting mechanism that they will be working with Halton Region Public Health. There will definitely be a conversation. There may be a reason for a high number of absences in a school. It might be a significant event in terms of, let's use something like Diwali, right? We might have a large population of students that are celebrating and would not be in school on that given day. So the communication would then be provided to us from Halton Region Public Health, and families would receive notification in a formalized letter from Halton Region Public Health. We will also have our COVID advisory page maintained in terms of with respect to school closure data. And we will continue to monitor and work with our Halton Region Public Health partners because, that is something that we will, as you know, they've got, I think Trustee Gerbents mentioned that their data dashboard has changed a little bit. There's some really significant and great data available, but they are also updating regionally. So when we're looking at data, we're looking at data within our communities as well. And I think that that's a really important source for families to be looking at. So I'd be happy to take any questions around case and contact management.
Great. Thank you so much, Superintendent Blackwell. That was really interesting. Trustee Gerbents.
Yes, thank you. A question. I have a couple of questions. But one is on the regional website, they have in the past been tracking outbreaks. Will there be such a thing as an outbreak now for schools? I know they still track them, of course, for institutions and congregate living. But I was just wondering if, since we don't have the PCR testing, if an outbreak is it may, like there may, as you say, exposure is kind of happening all the time. But since PCR testing is not going through the region, there's nowhere to report a rapid antigen test positive results. Is that going to become an obsolete term at the school level?
Yes, it's no, sorry, through the chair to Trustee Gerbents, it's no longer in the case and contact management protocol.
Okay. So as parents in the community, a second question, follow-up to what you were saying. So as parents in the community, I think for the most part, many people recognize themselves as part of a community, and they want to help keep people, their fellow neighbors and families that are friends of their children, safe. And so when they when they perhaps test positive, they contact the school. And I remember when one of my children was out of school for an absence, I would get a call and it would say, could you clarify if this is around COVID kind of thing. So school may be getting that information, but it doesn't actually get the intent of the parent in contacting the school at this point would be, I want to let people know that my child has COVID. Does that information go anywhere near the actual classroom or the parents in that classroom so that they can be aware, of the potential case that might be sitting right next door to them?
So through the chair to Trustee Gerbents, no, it does not. And there's no consistency in that reporting either. So if people aren't doing that, then we're now saying, the exposure is still there, right? It's still there. And if people are not reporting, then we may be providing a false measure, right? We have families as well that may last year we had people that started calling on other people, and it became really distrustful, quite frankly. The absence monitoring is a holistic measure that we can guarantee, yes, there are going to be people that are away for different things. People may be away because they're doing the right thing, which most people will do. People will be away because they're isolating, which is also, that will have a factor in the reporting data. So, take a look at the data, look at the absences. I know that if there are families that are concerned, they should reach out to their school and talk to the principal. I'm seeing an increase in data. Is what's happening? What are you doing? There are some really important measures. We've had lots of questions around combined classes. What are we doing if there are staff shortages? Are we combining classes? What does that look like? And it's often a conversation. We're working in a school environment, and for anyone that knows some of the protocols that are happening in here, it's a very, very safe place in terms of how we're interacting with COVID, right? We are masking. We are working on protocols around cohorting. There's hand hygiene. We remind your kids more than you remind your kids to wash your hands and use hand sanitizer. And, it does get really tedious when staff are saying, come on, put your mask on, make sure you're wearing your mask. People are invested in this together. And it's not a got you anymore. People are going to have COVID. We know the spread is there. We know the disease is less severe. We still have families that don't want to come forward because of the stigma around COVID. And I think it's really important that we recognize the society that we're living in and working with that exposure and mitigating risk with doing the right thing, following the screening tool. Please read the screening tool and the directions, folks. They've changed. You need to take the time to read through them. And everyone wants to do the right thing. The right thing is to take care of yourself, take care of your kids, and follow the isolation requirements that you've been given. And together, those are the practices that we need to have in place.
Thank you very much. I have more questions, but I'll just go back on the list. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. And this is a hot topic at the moment for many people. Could you, Superintendent Blackwell, through Director Ennis, just go over quickly what people can expect to see at ontario.ca? Like, what's the granularity that'll be coming out of the system and reported there? And you probably said it earlier. I was trying to get it down, but I didn't.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Al Harrison. One of the things that we have not seen is the output at this point. We received the memo probably Thursday or Friday around the new reporting tool. We have provided all the information to our staff. They've put it in today. There will be data on staff absence, student absence. It's also included a high level around our bus drivers and the absences for HSTS, which is our student transportation system. So that's something that we're still waiting to see what that will look like. We have not seen the output of the data, but it will be by school and it will be a percentage of absenteeism. And that is the language in the guide around what is being reported.
Thank you. It was that by school piece. I just wanted to understand whether it was going to be all aggregated or whether there was some disaggregation. And I understand there are concerns around privacy and, with the stigmatization that still exists and so on. So it'll be good to see this starting Monday. And hopefully it has struck kind of the right balance for people. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Al Harrison. So our speakers list is building. I'll just tell you who's on it. There's Trustee Collard, then Trustee Oliver, then Trustee Daniele, then Trustee Grabentz. I'm just going to also draw your attention quickly to those internal clocks that we're all trying to be very mindful of. So Trustee Collard, you're up next.
Thank you. Through you to the director. I understand the logic of how this disease has changed and how case management has changed. And I also know that our parents are not happy with not having metrics, without having that data of how many students in my child's class are homesick with COVID. They want that information. It's a comfort to them to know whether or not they have cause for concern. And without that data, I think they are going to have increased stress. So while I understand what's happened, I'm also getting calls from parents saying 30% is too high. We should be doing 15%. And I would like to understand from staff's perspective what 15% would look like if we were to go that way.
So through the chair to Trustee Collard, first of all, any additional voluntary measure of collecting data will not be accurate in terms of confirmed cases within a classroom. So I want to make sure that that's pretty clear. There is no obligation for reporting by a parent. So, that's, I think that's important to have out there. The measure, when you're talking about the 30%, the 30% is the indicator of when we would be communicating with public health, right? The data, if it's at 4%, is posted publicly. So that information is going to be available where, families, if you're watching the data and you see that, one day it's 4% and the next day it's 16%, maybe there's a question that you have around that, right? But the data is still going to be there. This may evolve. They may change their guidance or their direction. 15% is not a high number in terms of daily absences and on any given day. We could have a fair number of kids away. We could have 60 kids away in a school of 600 kids across all grades. And that's 10%, right? So, the numbers are the numbers, and looking at the school population, if I have a really small school, for example, 10% becomes pretty quickly, right? So the data will be posted. I don't know where the 15% is coming from. I know that number has been bounced around, but it's not unusual to have 10%. And we're still waiting for clarification on what baseline data is. Is it historical data that we've always reported, and to see whether it's 30% higher than the baseline? But that information is coming to us from the ministry.
If I might follow up, the 15% comes from a school board where trustees passed a motion to make the amount 15%. And I was just wondering if that would mean that we would be having to report to public health very frequently, because there are normally sick kids every day.
Yeah, and through the chair to Trustee Collard, very good. Thank you for the context. 15% we would be hitting without COVID, right? And what we do, we can report things to public health. Their direction is to act on the 30%. We don't dictate what public health does, or they follow direction from the Ministry of Health.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Trustee Oliver, then Daniele, then Grabins.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Director Ennis. I just want to thank Superintendent Blackwell for the wonderful update she provided for us and her continued work with public health. I'm very grateful for that very positive working relationship that our school board has with Halton Public Health. I have a couple of questions for clarification. You've alluded to reporting absence system that's coming online. And I did hear just this morning through an update from Halton Public Health to Regional Council that they are working on a new data collection mechanism, I believe. And of course, that doesn't surprise me as an alumni of Halton Public Health. I know firsthand how staff rise to the occasion and the challenge and how dedicated their staff are. So I also want to applaud Halton Public Health for the wonderful job they've done with vaccinating our students and staff in such a rapid manner. Point of clarification, your distribution of masks. So I understand that all staff have access to N95 mask. Is the same true for all of our students with special needs? And are the rest of the students getting a medical grade mask? And my second question for clarification is, you've mentioned that rapid antigen tests have been distributed to all elementary students and elementary staff, and I believe also bus drivers. Will they also be made available to our secondary students and staff? And if there's a delay, is it due to supply chain, or is it that the province wants to prioritize and wants to make sense of what do they need to put out to the elementary cohort first? If you could answer, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Oliver. Two very different questions, I think. The first one I'll address are the masks, and the masks that are provided for students are the 3-ply non-medical cloth masks. Families will provide masks for their own students. We don't make those decisions. The parents, we ask parents to make those decisions for their child. We just have the masking requirement. So students have the option to wear whatever mask that parents feel is best. And they bring multiple masks. I think many will have received, for those that celebrate different things over the holidays, may have received a few over the holidays. With respect to rapid antigen tests, and thanks for asking a question on rapid antigen tests. Prior to the break, if I could just take a few seconds here. Prior to the break, the rapid antigen tests that were distributed to our families, to all of our students, were to take them every 3 to 4 days as a test to return to school, or a test to stay. I guess they had that phrasing. The rapid antigen tests that arrived to us on Friday, as you heard earlier, we received that first supply. The province has been very clear on the first distribution in a phased approach to our elementary schools, students and staff, our bus drivers, as well as our shared childcare within our facilities. The second phase will be our secondary students and staff. And then finally, it would be our board staff. And that's the phasing that we've received. Again, if we receive supply for our elementary students first, we are awaiting further shipment for secondary. And as we mentioned earlier, our 95% rates in vaccination probably have a significant impact on that decision. The rapid antigen tests that families have, there's been lots of messaging. If you could please use them when you are symptomatic. They're for children that are symptomatic. They're not to be used consistently, every 2 or 3 days. They're a test to return earlier than the isolation. So if I'm a student and I feel symptomatic, I'm not able to go to school, I don't pass the screening tool, I can take a rapid antigen test. If I'm negative, another rapid antigen test 24 hours later and negative, I am able to return to school sooner. And my household members can return with me. If I take a rapid antigen test, if I'm positive, you don't need to take another rapid antigen test, you're positive. Follow the isolation requirements and then return following that. So they will be replenished. We will continue to receive supplies, as you heard earlier, and provide those to families as they become available to the end of the year.
Thank you. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. I've got two questions and I'm hoping to get them both out. And I'm referring back to earlier in the 5 or 6 questions ago, you mentioned the screening tool. And I'd like to go, my first question is regarding the communication that came from Director Ennis the other day, and it contains the COVID-19 symptoms and isolation guidelines for family, which says an individual is isolated if they're experiencing one of these 4 symptoms or 2 or more of these 6 symptoms, which would indicate that if you had one of those 6 symptoms, you would not need to isolate. Yet, when you go into the screening tool and you mark yes for one of those 6 symptoms, say a sore throat, you are told to isolate. So that's a confusion to parents that I'm wondering if you can help clear up. And then my second one, you were just talking about the rapid antigen test and the distribution. And I know that Superintendent Barnes has received this communication as well as I have, but you might want to look into it. The concern has been raised is that the antigen tests came in and they were taken apart into packages of 2 at an unknown location, unknown sterilization to be handed to vulnerable students who may be symptomatic. And I wonder if you can just address the safety of that as well. And those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Daniele. First of all, the screening tool, the ever-changing screening tool. So lots of different branches in that screening tool now in terms of isolation and 5 days or 10 days and who isolates and who doesn't. The long and short of it is that when you do the screening tool, you mentioned the 2 lesser symptoms, and that would be a condition where you would be presumed to have COVID-19. When you complete the screening tool, you may also receive the red X that says, do not go to school. You have one of the lesser, and it's the fine print, one of the lesser symptoms. You most likely do not have COVID, but you're sick, so stay home. Basically is what that last one says. You've got a stuffy nose, stay home. And it also tells you that your household members do not need to isolate. Another thing just around that is the clarity around symptoms. When you're checking off symptoms, please look at the language. It's new or worsening symptoms. So if you've done your isolation and you go to return and you do your screening tool and you feel better, yes, you might still have symptoms, but are they new or worsening? So we have brought that to the ministry just to have say, is there any way we could make it a yellow flag instead of a red or green and have 2 that look the same? So one is isolate for 24 hours. And if you're feeling better, come on back. And the other one is, no, you probably have COVID. So presume you have COVID and stay home, and your family members have to isolate.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the second question was on the distribution of kits. Those were done by our staff who are very much trained in COVID protocols. There is definitely physical distancing, hand hygiene, masking, all of the pieces that are involved in the kits. So they came in 25s. We developed a process, and a lot of our staff, including myself and a couple of other superintendents in this call, were on site helping out. The packaging, everything that came is packaged. It is wrapped, labeled, and then it is put in an envelope and sealed. There is nothing that is touched by us without it. It's all safe, and that every individual piece of that kit is wrapped. So people will receive it wrapped. They'll have to unwrap it to use it. And the instructions are at the board website and shared in communication to families. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. I may ask if you could possibly, when you get a chance tomorrow, put that in writing so that I can forward it back to the parents offering the concerns. But thank you for addressing both my questions. I appreciate it.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you. It's your night, Superintendent Blackwell. Trustee Gribetz. And
Actually,
then Trustee Reynolds is next. Sorry.
Trustee Reynolds is a first-time speaker, so.
Sorry, you're right. I'm sorry. So Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you for that. Through the chair to the director, I have two questions of clarification, please. I'd like to first follow up a question that was asked by one of my colleague, Trustee Oliver, regarding about the non-medical masks that are available to students. I had been asked by a parent as well as a staff member whether there is whether we could consider providing an upgraded mask, particularly for students with exceptional needs or who have some medical fragile considerations. And I know that so my question is that, my first question is that possible? Is there any consideration that we could provide for families who have specific needs, but also may not be able to provide them for themselves? So that was my first question.
I'm assuming I'm taking this one. Okay, so through the chair to Trustee Reynolds, we would not, parents provide medical, they make the choices for their own children, right? So if families were in a position where they wanted to seek a different type of mask, they would pursue that on their own. We would not reach out and say, here, choose this mask or this mask. As with anything, we have angel funds at many of our schools. We have funds available. We can support families with purchases, not only around masking, but in other areas as well, that principals always do. Sometimes we support families in purchasing medication, right, at the school level. So that would be something that would be something that a family would pursue or want to inquire about. Rather than us to, and I don't mean to use the word impose, but provide to other students. We trust that our families are very versed right now in this phase in the pandemic in terms of the masking requirements and what their students would need, and have obviously flexibility in choosing whatever masking they see fit for their child.
Okay, thank you. Just one follow-up of clarification point. This actually goes to a comment earlier that I heard regarding a letter that came from Dr. Menegini.
Sorry.
Megani, thank you. That was sent out to families. Is that, I hadn't seen that letter. Is that posted on our website, or could that be distributed to trustees? Because I'm very interested as to the messaging. I know you spoke to it, but it would be very helpful to have that in hand.
Yes, I through the chair to Trustee Reynolds, I think it was one of the many communications you probably received last week. So I'll make sure that gets out to trustees.
There you go. Sorry, Trustee Gerbentz.
Yes, thank you very much through you, Chair. There have been reports of people testing positive on rapid antigen tests after 5 days of being symptomatic. And I was wondering if you could clarify, are those 5 days like when you're actually considered contagious and you could still show positive in a rapid antigen test but not be contagious? Or because we're not saying that you have to test to return at this point. The ministry has not given us enough tests to be able to do that. So is that what sort of the medical science is, that people are just not contagious after 5 days?
Through the chair to Trustee Gerbentz, I feel like I'm a doctor right now. It has to do a little bit with you will continue to have viral load once you are a confirmed case of COVID-19. I would encourage, I think Dr. McGanny actually spoke to this today on in a webinar she held with Regional Council, which I think is public. Once you test positive, you don't need to test again, is really her, was the phrasing that she used. That it is very unusual that you would test positive again with the same variant. So with Omicron, that's something she talks about. I know that it's come up in terms of travel, international travel, because you no longer have a PCR result to show that you have had COVID-19, and you may still have viral load. So that means you could test positive down the road. That's something that they're trying to work on. Long and short of what you've asked, the 5 and 10 day isolations are based on vaccination status and as well as a period of communicability. So if you test days after you have tested positive, passed into your isolation period, you may still have viral load where you test positive, but you are able to return to school. And at any time, reach out to 311 or contact your healthcare professional. They'd be able to provide the best advice, but it would not be unusual that would happen. Just as you would not be symptom-free when returning to school many times. Your symptoms will be improving.
Okay, that's another big point. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, so I've had a request for a break, so we're just going to take 5 minutes to stretch. Trustee Blackwell, you can take 5 minutes to have a rest. Oh, sorry, yes, Director Ennis.
That concludes my report for tonight.
Okay, so again, just if we could have a quick 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and hopefully wrap it up anyway, quickly. So thank you, Director Ennis. 5 minutes, we'll be back at 4 minutes. We'll come back for 9:30, okay? All right, 9:30. One, two, three, four. I know the 5. I can just need to see one more pop. There we are. All right. Okay, so that ends the director's report. Are there any other outstanding questions regarding the director's report? Oh, Trustee Collard.
I don't know if this should fall under trustee comments and questions or if I should ask it now because it's COVID related.
Go for it now.
Okay. So I've also had a number of questions from my community about HEPA filters, the number that we've received as a board, and how they've been distributed. People want to know that there's a HEPA filter in their child's classroom, and I know that we weren't given one per classroom. So if we could understand how they were distributed and the decisions were made, that would help. Thanks very much.
Thank you for the question, Trustee Collard. I might ask Executive Officer Godet to speak to that.
Yeah, good evening again. Thanks for the question. So I'm going to rely on a few notes that I pulled together. And I'll say, this is the 4th wave, so we've been through this before. We've, when I take it back to the first shutdown, some of the actions that were taken included all schools being assessed for their mechanical ventilation status. Some of our older schools do rely on natural ventilation. So as such, those schools have radiators for heat, rely on operable windows and opening doors and such. At the outset, classrooms without mechanical ventilation were prioritized for HEPA air purifiers to be delivered. And with that, we deployed, I think it was about 475 units to schools that were identified to lack mechanical ventilation. All schools with mechanical ventilation, we upgraded the filter medias to MERV 13. That's a hospital level grade. And I should state that when we were assessing the mechanical ventilation, what our target was 6 air changes per hour. That was the target that we were assessing for mechanical ventilation. So in addition to adjusting the filter media, all ventilation systems were adjusted to increase fresh air makeup. So the dampers were adjusted so we weren't recycling the air within the facility. That's often used to harness the existing heat or cooling temperature that's already in the building. So we've negated the operational efficiency for the health and safety of staff and students by opening up the dampers to increase fresh air makeup. Then also our board was already pretty proactive in terms of its filter media changes. We do change, prior to this, we were changing every 2 months our air filters. That has continued with our MERV 13 filters. So after we reopened, additional HEPA air purifiers were provided and I'll say prioritized based on programming needs. So what we saw was certainly an effort to supply HEPA air purifiers to kindergarten classrooms where children were unmasked. When the system closed again, but operations were reinstituted for life skills and CPP programs, we ordered additional HEPA air purifiers for deployment to those programs that were operating. And then at some point, there was a large shipment that we received from the ministry upon their reinvestment and I'll say reopening of some larger spaces such as gymnasiums, libraries, lunchrooms, etc. So with that's kind of the priority in terms of how it was deployed, how these units were deployed, and certainly, the facility was first, then the programming. I'll say with our shipments, we've tried to deploy a few extra to each school to, I'll say, respond to unique site circumstances. Every space may not be operated as it was intended. We recognize we've been hosting virtual as well as in-person learning, and as such, we've tried to afford administrators some flexibility in terms of their unique site needs. We've received a lot of questions around fundraising and donations, and we've been saying no to that. There is a ministry fundraising guideline that explicitly prohibits that as a fundraising use because the ministry actively funds this effort. Furthermore, from my perspective, the deployment of these units has been challenging given we've got 4 different models within our system. That's not ideal. And part of that is because we've been receiving shipments from MGCS. While we're thankful for that, the different models create some different issues for us from an operations and a maintenance perspective. And so part of the rationale for personally not wanting to receive donations is it does come with a maintenance liability, and we're starting to, I'll say, experience and respond to that in a formal way. We've got a PM program, a preventative maintenance program in for cleaning and changing of the filters, but we are also starting to experience some unit malfunctions, which is certainly not what we would want to see with additional units being donated. So in addition to all of that, we have invested $40 million just in the last 2 years into our ventilation systems. And I will say that is the role of our facility services team. And long before COVID, we've been upgrading our mechanical ventilation systems, trying to add air conditioning, trying to improve the conditions for learning by improving the circulation of air. And maybe the last thing I'll add is, we've got a number of portables in our system as well. And all of our portables have unit ventilators, which do ventilate to the outside. They bring in fresh air as well. And as such, they are deemed as mechanically ventilated and not requiring air purifiers. So I hope that helps.
Yes, it is very helpful. Thank you for all that information. I was just wondering if you could give me a grand total to the number of HEPA filters. You said there was about 475 deployed the first round. So what would the total be now approximately? I'm not going to make you go down to the actual one.
Yeah, we had a few. So we had, I think 475 was the first round. Then we received 33 additional that were deployed of a different make. We ordered, I believe it was 75 for CPP and life skills. And I believe we received just over 1,000. I forget what the exact number was, 1,085, if memory serves me right. So the total on our website is correct, other than we're missing the 75 or so that we deployed to CPP and life skills was not tallied in that. And that's something that is missing from that inventory on our website.
Thank you so much for all this work. It's an incredible amount of work to have done, and I know that the public really appreciates it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Trustee Oliver.
Thanks. Through your chair to Director Director Ennis. I have a comment, and I think it's going to be of particular interest and relevance to Superintendent Blackwell. It stems from an email I received from a parent, but upon further reflection, it makes me think about that there's some implications here for the data collection tool that will be developed either by the province or by public health for our schools. Specifically, this person, first of all, expressed concern that we won't be reporting numbers, but you have addressed that. And secondly, speaks to the issue of, if a student is at home and they continue to do work, they may not be marked as absent. So it speaks to the idea that reporting absenteeism is a little bit more complicated when you factor in some of the options that students can take when they are off sick and how that gets reported, in that they might be homesick, but they are actually doing work. So, how is their absence or non-absence reported? And that will impact on the stats that are being fed to public health with respect to reaching that, 30% target, I guess. So I just wanted to flag that for you, because that's something that public health might not be thinking about when they're designing their tool, in terms of all the different options that exist for students in how they participate, whether virtually or in person, and then how that's tracked in the system as part of absence reporting. Thank you.
So I can respond if you'd like, through the chair to Trustee Oliver. The reporting tool does delineate that. We know that we have different coding for students that are engaged in asynchronous learning. They would not, if we know that they're at home engaged in asynchronous learning because they've chosen to, they are not reported as absent, the way that somebody would be reported absent because they are at home in isolation. So that is delineated in the tool.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, so just sort of really to close the loop with the director's report. So as many of you know, we've been receiving numerous questions, concerns, and requests from the public to raise our voices in as far as the ministry's response to school. And so this week we had started to craft a letter outlining some of the key concerns that had come to us from the public, as well as from around the trustee table. However, after listening to Superintendent Blackwell's extensive report, I really do feel that many of the items have already been addressed. So we had 3 outstanding issues that we saw as being concerns of ours and the public as far as the government's response was concerned. As you all have access to the letter that we had drafted, I can go through those 3, but I'm just wondering if there is anything outstanding, or if as it stands right now, we are quite satisfied with the response that Superintendent Blackwell has given us, looking at the return to school protocols that are in place within our school board to keep our children safe. So there was Trustee Joanna.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you want to continue on.
Oh, I was just going to sort of outline. So there was the first off, which I think is always going to be a concern, is the consultation that sometimes is missing between the government and the school board. So with the return to school announcement, which was made officially to us on Wednesday, there was already notification in other media outlets that had come out on Wednesday the 12th, but when they originally announced it, it was on the 10th. So that's something that I think is an ongoing concern as far as communication between the government and boards. The second piece was looking at vaccine and booster prioritization. But again, Superintendent Blackwell has spoken of Halton's outstanding efforts to ensure all of our students are having access to the vaccines. And then lastly was looking at the testing and school-based reporting approach. But again, I think Trustee Blackwell has touched on that piece as well. So I'm just wanting to check if everybody is okay with us leaving this for right now. If not, if you can let me know by raising your hand if there's anything of concern. Trustee Collard.
So you raised a really good point that we are doing a great job here in Halton with vaccine and booster prioritization. But when we write to the ministry, are we only writing on behalf of the students in our board, or are we writing on behalf of students across Ontario? And I am actually honestly asking that question because I think we should be just as concerned about students in Peel and Kingston and London Ontario as we are about our own students here at home. And I still have concerns for the children in this province.
All right, thank you. I agree with the sort of the concern for the greater good, but I would think that we are in the main ready to support our students. If anybody else can give further clarification, who might know better than that. But I think in the main, when we are writing letters, our first priority would always be our students. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and I thank Trustee Collard for raising that. I can't answer that question, but I'm thinking that we could put a different spin on our letter. As you know, I'm very happy to advocate for public health, and I do see that, at least in Halton, most of the issues have been addressed as per the most recent update from Superintendent Blackwell and what we've heard from regional council updates this morning. So in terms of Halton, things are looking good. And the only thing would be to, you know, to support that and ensure that that trend continues. But the same might not be true in other jurisdictions. And so perhaps we could put a different spin on that in terms of, appreciating the position that we find ourselves in and advocating that those same efforts are being made in other parts of the province. And then the only point that, and I look to my colleagues for reflection, is the point around including education sector stakeholders in any further consultations, so that that education perspective is brought into consideration, and that some of those decisions are made with that in mind and shared earlier, so that staff have time and resources to adequately prepare. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Rocha, you were there, but you're gone. So I don't know if your hand just went missing or you taken it down.
I did take it down, but I'll defer to Trustee L. Harrison to go again, and I'll just go back in the queue. I need to reorganize my thoughts.
Okay, Trustee L. Harrison, Vice Chair L. Harrison.
Thanks. Through you, Madam Chair, to Trustee Collard's point. Oftentimes, I believe our letters are contextualized to what's happening in Halton. So, for example, with the capital, the benchmarks and so on, the escalation factors are very much, they're happening around the province, but not necessarily to the extent they are in Halton. So that's one example that came to mind. And the other thing that came to my mind is just that we don't really know what the other public health units are doing. I'm imagining that they, like directors of education and so on, are also collaborating on things. So I just know it takes us an awful chunk of resources during the meetings and afterwards. And to go down that path, I guess I would want to just make sure it's not in vain, sort of thing, just because our intentions would be good, but I don't know that we'd have much impact if everybody else is just doing it already. Thank you.
Okay, so we were really at the end closing the loop on the director's report. So we're kind of now sort of just going into trustee questions and comments. So we'll continue along this line, but I'm just cognizant that we're really no longer addressing the director's report. So Trustee Grabentz.
Well, I think that as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, it's frustrating that that our schools, we are focused, as it's mentioned, we have a great vaccination rate for our grade 7 through 12 plus, but we are lagging and plateauing, and that stabilization of, if a student is vaccinated, they're less likely to have symptoms that will keep them out of school potentially longer. It's better for student achievement and well-being. We should be asking the government to support targeted education programs for parents so that they understand the safety and efficacy of the vaccine that's out there. That's my thought.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Corbett. I'm not sure if anything's coming from that thought. Why don't you sit on it, and then as we go through, because we have to come back to trustee questions and comments at the end. Does that sound like an idea? Okay, great. Director Ennis, thank you so much for your director's report, and particularly thank you so much to Superintendent Taha, Superintendent Nagoy, Superintendent Blackwell, for all the amazing information you were able to give to us. I know coming into this meeting, a lot of us had questions, concerns, fears, and I think through the information you've given us, you really allowed us to have a little bit more peace of mind. So thank you very much. All right, we have now moved on to communication from the chair, and attached to the agenda are the letters that we have received back, as well as letters from the different regions. Again, having similar asks from the government as we have in the past. They're all attached to the agenda. Finally, after that, we are at 6.7, which is committee reports. The Governance Standing Committee report was submitted by Trustee Rocha and is attached to our agenda. Trustee Rocha, was there anything you wanted to add to it, or being attached?
No, what I'd like to do is just publicly acknowledge the trustees who worked on this committee. So you, Chair Shuttleworth, Vice Chair L. Harrison, and Trustee Collard. So the Governance Standing Committee was established last year, and it accomplished a great deal of work in collaboration with subcommittees. So the report covers a list of all the items it accomplished, the ones that are still in some pending status. So it's just a nice summation of all the work that was done, and a big thanks to everyone who collaborated on doing the work we're supposed to do as trustees. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Trustee Rocha. And just a quick check-in. Were there any other committee reports that were coming to the table this evening? Trustee Collard.
This is just a really brief one from the Trustees Professional Development Standing Committee. We held our first professional development of the year yesterday. So I don't have a written report yet, but there will be one coming to the next meeting, and stay tuned for the next trustees professional development opportunity on the 31st.
Great, thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for that training opportunity that we had. Oh my goodness, was that seriously just yesterday? Yeah, it was amazing, but it doesn't seem like just yesterday. But again, thank you so much, Trustee Collard, and also Trustee Daniele, because I know you were both instrumental in bringing that speaker to us. All right, we are now up to 6.8, which are trustee questions and comments. So I will check if there's anybody who has any questions or comments to bring to the floor, please? Trustee Gray.
Yes, thank you very much. As everyone knows, with the beginning of school this week, some parents have elected to have their children stay at home for the next week or maybe just even a few days. I'm not sure. I was just wondering, because I've had some communication from some of the parents in my area. What supports are available for those students who, through their parents, have elected to stay at home just for, indeterminate periods of time? Just wonder if if we could hear what those supports would be. And I'm directing this to Director Ennis. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gray. I'm going to ask Superintendent Salmini to respond.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair to Trustee Gray, for students that have chosen a short-term remote learning, they're going to be supported by staying connected through the learning management system for their classroom. So in elementary, that would be Google Classroom, and in secondary, that would be Brightspace. And in that space, they will have asynchronous activities that they can complete independently, as well as some other resources will be posted there, or ways to get to them, including some of the ministry promoted resources. Teachers will be periodically checking in with students, but certainly we would also encourage students that want to reach out to their teachers to do that as well for support while they're on this short-term remote learning time.
Well, I thank you very much, Superintendent Salmini. I think that will be very helpful to the parents that have been asking these questions of me. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you, Trustee Gray. Trustee Grubens.
Okay, well, I have crafted a motion. Around the topic that I had mentioned recently. So I will throw it out there and see if I can get a seconder on this, I suppose, and then we can discuss if people want to suspend the rules to deal with it. Okay. Whereas vaccinated children have been shown to have milder symptoms and shorter lengths of sickness due to COVID, and whereas the best learning environment for students is within our facilities, be it resolved that the chair write a letter to the Minister of Education to create or financially support targeted education programs for parents of 5 to 11-year-olds about the safety and efficacy of the COVID vaccine.
Okay, so Trustee Grubens has put the motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Trustee Oliver is seconding. So the motion, Trustee Grubens, is there any chance that you can share that motion with everyone so they can take a look? I know
I've just scribbled it down. So if you want to give me a moment,
Great.
I can write it down
Great.
and type it out.
All right. Did anyone have any questions or comments or debate around Trustee Grubens's motion? Vice Chair L. Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I guess it's information seeking and a question. So when we wrote a letter in September 2021 asking the minister to consider adding COVID to the ISPA, at that time we were adding our voice, I guess, to a growing chorus of organizations requesting the same. The Chief Medical Officer of Health has said that's not happening, I do believe. But in that same letter, we did mention a need for education regarding the efficacy of vaccines. So I am just cognizant of the fact that we never get responses to these letters. The point, although it was not the focus of that letter, it was in that letter. I just wonder whether these efforts are best directed to the province or whether the ask is really of the local public health unit, because it seems like a lot of things are getting pushed down to the local level at this point to figure out. And I was just trying to look on the region's website to see maybe they have that already. I'm not super sure. So it's not that I don't want this to happen. It's more that I want to be as effective as possible in our advocacy, and continuing to ask the minister, it's like running into a brick wall, I think. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Chair Harrison. So just quickly, we have reached 10 o'clock, so we do need to extend our meeting. Can I have somebody suggest an extension time? We really are right at the end. The only things left are public questions. Yes, Trustee Garretts.
How about 15 minutes? We do it in 15? We need to stay in our own lanes, though.
Right. What does everybody think? Do they think 15 is good? I see Trustee Rocha looking a little bit skeptical. Trustee Rocha.
Through you, Chair. The reason I'm skeptical is that I don't know how many questions we have from the public, and that may dictate how much more time we need.
Vice Chair Harrison, have you had a look at that? Any questions?
Yes, I have looked, and there was one, but it was answered. It was asked by a trustee during the director's report. So I believe we don't have any additional ones, but I'll just take a look and make sure. Thanks.
Great. So then are we thinking 15 minutes is good? We need to be super concise, super internal clocks. So I have Trustee Garrett saying 15 minutes. Do we want to go for 15 minutes? Anyone saying yes? I'll second that one. And oh, great. Trustee Rocha, you're going 15 minutes too? Any discussion? All right, then quickly, all those in favor for extending for 15 minutes, that will take us to 10:18. Oops, didn't work. Awesome, that carries unanimously. Okay, we're extended till 10:18. Okay, so Vice Chair Harrison, your concern is the duplicity in that if we are writing the same ask more than once, it's worrisome that maybe there's not as much impact.
Yes, although I just want to be clear that it was not the focus of that letter.
Okay.
Yep.
Trustee Rocha. And then, sorry, Trustee Oliver is after Trustee Rocha.
Okay, through you, Chair. I think based on what we heard tonight from Superintendent Blackwell, in that there is information available at the local level. I'm hesitant to agree to write a letter asking for information where information already exists. And at the same time, if we want information on the efficacy of a vaccine, it shouldn't just be targeted to children ages 5 to 11. That should come from a provincial standpoint to educate everybody, both adults and children, on the efficacies of vaccines. So with that perspective, I would say no to writing a letter, only because information exists, and if we want information, it should come at a provincial level, not from the Ministry of Education.
All right, thank you, Trustee Rocha. Trustee Oliver.
Yes, thank you through your chair. I do understand where Trustee Grebenz is heading and what her intent is in the motion. We are looking at a comprehensive provincial public health education campaign, and that should probably rest with the government. But there are other health partners who would be well suited to provide education campaigns that are, maybe age group specific. So perhaps we can take that away and give it some thought and see what best makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Oliver. So I see, Trustee Grebenz.
Well, I can take this away as a possible notice of motion for the next meeting. How's that?
I think that might be a smart idea, because then again, we can also see where things are going. There are all of these things that were spoken of today that are happening Monday. When Monday rolls around, there might not be. So we're just hopeful and seeing that that's coming forward. So then that'd be a great idea. So thank you very much, Trustee Grebenz. All right, so you're pulling the motion from the floor. Do we need to do anything, or we just let it drop?
You can get unanimous consent to let it drop at this point.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Manager Gortmaker, help me out, please.
I'm not sure you had a seconder for that.
Yes, we did, Trustee Oliver.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Stand corrected. Thank you.
Okay. So then do we need to, Trustee Gortmaker, or sorry, Trustee Manager Gortmaker, do we then need to vote to put this aside for this moment in time?
Trustee Grebenz can offer a date and just refer it to the next meeting or whatever meeting she chooses.
Okay.
I offer the next meeting.
Okay, great. So all those in favor of
deferring
this till the first meeting in February.
Yes.
One. Trustee Amos. Oh, there she is. Thank you. Oh, there you go. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Are there any other trustee questions and comments? I do have one. And I'm not sure this will be to the director. I just know that this week letters were sent out for both IB and iSTEM. I'm wondering if staff can give us an update as to numbers. Director Ennis. Thank you.
Good evening, trustees. Through your chair, Shuttleworth, I'm going to ask Superintendent Salmini to respond.
Thank you. Through the chair to Chair Shuttleworth. I don't have the exact numbers, but what I can tell you is that our staff have reported that we've had more applications than we've had in the past, but I can certainly, get a better idea of numbers if you wish.
Yeah, that would be appreciated. Oh, were you going to say something, Director Ennis? Nope. All right, that would be appreciated. I would love to hear sort of the numbers. I thought we usually get that, so thank you very much. Are there any other questions and or comments from trustees? All right, so that brings us to public questions. Vice Chair Harrison, you said that there was a question submitted, but it's already been answered.
That's correct. Trustee Daniele asked the question about the screening tool under the director's report.
Great. So then
At 9:15, if anybody's looking for it.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you so much, Trustee Daniele.
Yeah.
All right. So questions posed during live stream meetings may be answered during the meeting, particularly those related to agenda items or at the following meeting at the discretion of the chair. As tonight, there was a question that was already asked and answered by a trustee. So that will be left to be for somebody to take a look at the video or reach out to the trustee to get the answer. There are several ways that you can be heard at our meetings, not only by submitting questions online, but also speaking directly to your trustees. Contact details are available on our website. So as we come to the end of our second meeting, I really want to again, I can't do it enough, thank everyone here for all the hard work that they've done, all the questions that they've answered. I really appreciate everything. I know all the trustees too as well. Have a great rest of the week, everyone. And can I have, oh, sorry, no, we've exhausted our agenda and it's 10:11. So I call this meeting adjourned. Have a great night, everybody.